Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Most of the art supplies I own today are things I once really wanted, and yet I still find myself tempted to buy more, even when I don't actually need anything. That made me stop and question what buying is really doing for my creative practice, and what I'm doing with all the materials I already own. So this year I'm trying something different. I'm not buying any new art supplies, not as a punishment, but as a way to refocus on actually making art and using the materials I own. I want to spend a little bit of time unpacking this because I think it affects almost all of us. Buying art supplies can feel like progress. It feels like you're investing in your creativity, even when you're not actually making anything. And I don't think that's a personal failure. I think it's a very human response to how art is marketed to us now, or art supplies. On social media, artists are constantly reviewing art supplies, buying new things, swatching all of the colors, and it only takes one look at the comment sections in these videos to see that they inspire so many people to buy more stuff. Have you ever noticed that art haul videos, those videos in which people unpack and demonstrate a whole lot of new art supplies? Those are often among the most watched videos on art channels. So it's tempting to buy things, it's tempting to show them off to your followers, and it's tempting for the followers to then also buy them. It's some kind of vicious overconsumption cycle that we're all trapped in, I think. I certainly have been. And the artists, they don't even get paid for art haul videos. It also gives this impression that to be a serious artist means constantly buying lots more supplies, keeping up with all the new developments and all the new innovations, all the new sets and colors that all the different brands keep coming out with. And then I haven't even mentioned the actual sponsored content, so basically full-on advertising, where people get paid or send products for free to promote them to their followers. I think anyone who's watching has probably experienced this feeling of watching a video of someone who does something that you admire, whether it's art or other creative hobbies like, say, photography or baking, or furniture making, and you thought, if only I had those tools, I could make something as good as this, which we all know isn't true. And of course there's nothing wrong with that. I would also never claim that you can make anything with very few or very cheap materials. I think learning about art materials is totally useful. I also think all those videos are useful to see the different materials, the colors, the textures, understanding how they compare and so on. But I guess we should be careful not to immediately impulse buy something that we see in a video like that, but really use them more as educational tools and think more deeply about what we actually should buy. I also think that it's worth investing in expensive materials. Some things you can only achieve with good materials. But I have regrets though. Maybe I shouldn't call them mistakes exactly, but there are two patterns that I really notice in hindsight. I think for one, it's buying cheaper things in the beginning so I could get more or I could accumulate things more quickly. When I was starting out on my art journey, I wanted different media, watercolors, pencils, gouache, markers, oil crayons, plus of course paper, sketchbooks, brushes, etc. But of course I couldn't afford to go and buy professional grade versions of all of those things. But rather than being patient and trying to accumulate things slowly and only starting with a couple of colors in each medium, I bought some cheaper supplies. But of course this didn't take away my desire to later get the professional grade versions of those things. And now, years later, I have so many incredible materials from the best brands. And so, of course, I don't want to use the cheaper things anymore that I bought in the beginning. So I think if I could go back a couple of years, I would tell myself, be patient, only buy a few colors, but invest in the good ones, and then take the time that it takes to save up for the next material to really get to know the things you already have. Like for instance, you could go once a month to the art shop and just buy a few high quality colors in the medium you want. You know, a few watercolor tubes or a few pencils. You can just start out with 3 or 4 or 5, you know, whatever you can afford, but get the good ones. And then you can later build on your collection when you know that you actually really use those things. And the other regret, or let's say pattern, I've noticed, is buying a similar product to something I already have. Usually because I see other artists using and loving those brands. I think here the influence from watching others and from advertising plays a big role. Even when I already own something that is super high quality and that I'm totally happy with, I'm still always curious about the alternative versions of the same product from other brands. There's that little voice nagging in my head, but what if the other one is slightly different, slightly better, more opaque, more saturated, has even more beautiful colors, and so on and so on. For instance, I already had good gouache, acrylic gouache, and watercolors. But then I still went and bought a set of the Himi gouache because everyone was using and loving them online. I also bought the Kuretake Gansai Tambi paints, you know, those Japanese watercolors, because I saw them everywhere. Again, everyone seemed to love them, everyone was talking about them, but both of these products were actually of lower quality than what I already have. And I have to say, I don't really love either of them. It's of course always personal, but for me, the Kuretake paints are way too sticky, and I really don't like that. And the Himi gouache was never really impressive in terms of saturation or texture, but then it also dried out so quickly, and now it can only be used in this kind of watered down version. There's also other examples where I'm glad to say that I didn't always give in. For instance, you probably know my absolute favorite pencils are the Caran d'Ache Luminance pencils, which are artist grade professional pencils. And they're amazing. Yeah, there's nothing I could improve. But then I see other people who also have luminance pencils that also buy some of the Derwent drawing pencils. And they also buy the Faber-Castell Polychromos ones. Some other people have the Holbein pencils. And those are all amazing artist grade too. Yeah, and then that little voice is again in my head saying, oh, but maybe you should try those too. What if they're even better or even more suited for a specific thing? No, I don't need them. With the Polychromos, I actually bought a few over the years, just a couple single ones. And none of them are better than the Luminance. Like, it's always actually slightly disappointing. When you buy something, it's always exciting and you're full of anticipation and you imagine how it'll level up your skills. And then it arrives and sometimes the excitement is already gone a bit, isn't it? Sometimes I bought things and I swatched them and then I didn't use them for weeks. I just put them in the drawer because I already had something like that. Do you ever notice this? The difference between the excitement and the anticipation of buying something and then the feeling of actually making art with it? Or the disappointment when you realize that just because you have that fancy new brush or paint or paper now, your art still doesn't look professional? Over time, I also noticed that constantly adding new materials came with a cost, other than the obvious financial cost. And that's more decisions, more pressure to use all those things, and less time actually sitting down and working, because you always have to grab all the stuff, figure out what you're going to use first, and so on. For me, it really started to fragment my attention instead of supporting my practice. I've talked before about how I struggle with decision fatigue a lot when I sit down to paint. I often don't know what to paint, but part of that is also the material choices. Do I draw or do I paint? Or do I do mixed media? Which pencil brand? The watercolor ones or the regular ones? Which paint should I use? Which brush? Which paper? What colors? It seems like I have to make a million decisions before I can actually start making the first mark on the page. And just the fact that sometimes I sort of curate these smaller palettes, that already shows the overwhelm that comes from having too many things, and that I basically need to make this effort to pare things down, to actually liberate myself and feel more free and at ease while creating. And then we're not even speaking about the physical space it takes yet. All these materials have to be stored somewhere, and ideally in a way that makes them easily accessible. Because I think we all know, once something is tucked away deep in a shelf or hiding under a pile of other things, we're probably not going to use them. And of course, there is one more big factor that I haven't even mentioned yet, and that is the environment. I don't have to tell you the state of our planet, the insane amount of trash we produce, the plastics and toxins, and all the resources and extraction it takes to manufacture everything. I try to live eco-friendly, and I think I'm doing reasonably okay, but I still have to make a constant effort not to overconsume. Everything is so cheap and so available. You can buy something within seconds online, and the advertising is all around us. I mean, it's hard, you guys. But I think one thing that's actually helped me realize a lot of these things is one of my passions that I don't think I've ever told you about. So I'm actually really into decluttering and organizing. I'm, for instance, a huge fan of Marie Kondo. You know, this woman who became famous worldwide for her book on how to declutter and organize your things. But I also love watching shows where people tackle their houses full of stuff and that sort of thing. I can't really explain why. I just really enjoy watching those things. Now, I'm no minimalist for sure, but when it gets too crowded in my place and there's just things everywhere, it does make me feel a bit claustrophobic. And I just love decluttering, how it makes me feel. I've done it my whole life, every now and then, just going through stuff like t-shirts or cutlery or vases or just everything, and giving the things that I no longer want to thrift stores. I guess it's partly because I've moved apartments many times, and then it's sort of natural that each time you have to pack all those boxes, you ask yourself, is this really worth packing? Is this something I'm actually gonna use? Is this worth taking to the new place? Do I want this to take up space in my new home? So anyway, long story short, this passion has, I guess, given me a critical eye whenever I look at all the things I own. It's hard for me to ignore when I have things I never use or don't really want anymore. Having started my art journey around 6 or 7 years ago, I have everything now that I've wanted in the beginning, and much more. I have great quality options in every medium I use. So this year, I think it's time that I stop buying more and focus on using the products I have and just make more art. And that's why this year I'm doing a no-buy challenge. No new art supplies. This isn't about punishment or restriction. It's also not about never buying anything again. For me, this no-buy year is about shifting my focus from accumulating tools to building a stable rhythm. It's also about shifting from only using the very, very, very favorite things I have now to actually forcing me to use all of these things that I've accumulated. From asking, what should I buy next? To asking, what can I do with what's already here? I also want to see whether I can use the materials I like less for some explorations, to try crazy techniques or to use them for artworks where you need big quantities. And if not, then I will know that I can give them to someone who will use them. What do you already own that you feel like you haven't really explored yet? Or that, if you're honest, you don't really enjoy using, but that you're still holding on to? I'm really curious to compare notes with you because I have a sense that we all have quite a few materials in our shelves that we don't really enjoy. So I'm not setting super specific rules. Ideally, I'd like to buy no new art supplies whatsoever. I've considered whether I should make an exception for when I finish something, a favorite pencil or ink or paper, but I worry that those exceptions will keep me from using the alternatives I have and to get creative with them. And I also want to give myself permission to use those supplies that aren't perfect. Things I don't love, things that were cheap or impulsive. Maybe they're not for finished work. Maybe they're for warm-ups or experiments or drawing with friends. For instance, I have 2 favorite types of sketchbooks right now. And what I want is to rebuy them every time I run out. But I also still have a stock of at least 10 other unused sketchbooks that I've bought previously. Not to mention all of the paper I own. So I guess finishing my favorite type of sketchbook would actually help me to use those alternatives. But I can't promise that I will manage to accept this discomfort of using the less than favorite tools. We'll see. I will try. It's a challenge after all. Maybe I should try to reframe it in my head, not just as a no-buy challenge, but also as a use-up challenge. If you want, I can keep you updated on this, or maybe at the end of the year we'll see how it all worked out. So, of course, I'm curious if any of you have ever thought about doing a no-buy challenge. Is anyone recognizing themselves in my experiences? It's obviously the beginning of a new year. Happy New Year, by the way. So I know it's a moment where many people take stock and make resolutions for the new year. I know that a no-buy year might be extreme for some. And of course, what suits you depends on your own journey, what you already have, what you use, what you want, etc. But I think if a full no-buy year feels like too much, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be a no impulse buy rule. Like I've seen people talking about this. So everything they want to buy has to go on a list, and they only allow themselves to actually buy it after a certain period of time has passed. Sometimes it's a week, sometimes a month. And they end up deciding against buying a lot of those things, just because when you actually think about it for a bit, you realize, I don't really need that, I don't really want that. Or it could be not buying anything in certain categories where you already have good materials. It could even be just taking stock of what you already have and committing to organizing it in a way where you have a good overview and where everything is easily accessible so you actually use it. Let me know, if you were to set one small rule for yourself this year, what would it be? In the coming week, I want to do some kind of inventory of all the art materials I have and do a little reorganizing as well. I was thinking I could even take some pictures or make a list or something, because I had this idea that it would be so cool if I could see at the end of my no-buy year how much materials I've actually used up, to compare what I have now and what remains. I'd just really like to see how many art materials I actually consume in a year. Would you be interested in that? Because I could of course turn this into a video. I could also tell you like my favorites versus things I regret buying and how I organize my art materials and so on. Let me know what you think in the comments. It's a topic I really care about, so I really wonder what everyone's thinking. Thanks so much for watching. Like and subscribe if you want to support me and my little channel. And I really hope to see you again next week. Stay creative and take care.